toys, go to the Dollar Tree store, start collecting toys. Last year we ran out of toys. First year ever, we've been doing it since my brother, Pastor Mike, went home to be with the Lord in 2003. It was our first toy giveaway. We did it in remembrance of Pastor Mike Lewis. And then we did it that way for about 5 years, and then we thought Pastor Mike would probably get mad at us if we keep putting his name in the middle of it. And so, but we still remember Pastor Mike, what a great man of God, what he did here. And so we continue to do it, you know, to have the toy giveaway. And what we do is every year we get involved with the parade, the Christmas parade here. I have no idea what the theme is, but every year the theme has nothing to do with Jesus. And so somehow we twist it to make it have something to do with Jesus. And so every year we do that. We usually get the motorcycles in the parade, which hopefully this year we'll have some bikes come out. We hand out tracts. And we invite everybody from the parade to the toy giveaway. Okay, so we end up with a lot of people here. So be praying for that, okay? You guys gonna be praying for it?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, don't forget. You know we remember to pray over our food, huh? Most of the time? When you're praying over your food, just go, Lord, thank you for this food and bless the toy giveaway. Amen? Amen. Also, we're praying about going back over to the reservation, San Carlos. We stopped a while back because of financial reasons when we went through the time of recession and all. And so we're praying about that. Pray for me. I'm going to call a lady named Mary today and talk to her about coming back to San Carlos. It's a trip out there, I'll tell you. You get out there, you will be surrounded by Indians. Okay? And some of them are friendly, some of them aren't. You know? And almost all of them have drinking problems. So it's a crazy thing over there, but it's a blessing too, because when we go over there, what we've done every year at the beginning of the year, we take whatever toys were left over. We haven't done it for about 8 years, but we're going to go back to doing it, Lord willing. And we take whatever is left over from the toy giveaway, and we take it over to San Carlos, and we do a toy giveaway over there. And so pray for that too. So when you're praying for your food, I don't want to give you too much, because I know when people pray too much before we eat, I get mad at them. So just pray, for the toy giveaway in San Carlos. Amen? And your food. Let's pray. Father, we love you. We praise you. Thank you for today. Thank you for everybody here. Just pray that, God, you would bless this service, this time that we have of diving into your word. Your word is just full of truth, full of lessons, what to do, what not to do. We thank you for that, Lord. Your word says that it's alive and powerful, sharper than any two-edged sword. So this word that we're reading is not just like any other book. It's a supernatural book. And Lord, help us, Lord, to apply it to our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. We're going to be in 2 Samuel this morning, chapter 14. And I call this message, It's a Family Tradition. We're going to see, as we go through 2 Samuel, that David's kids are following right after David's lead about not following after God. We can be a great leader. We can be a great person at work. We can even be a great husband or a father, or not husband or father, but a great husband or a wife, and be a lousy parent. If we're not careful, we can end up a lousy parent. And I think that's where David is. David was a great man. He won so many wars. He was a warrior. He loved God. But he spent so much time on other things inside, his family suffered. And I want to learn from this. Most of my kids are grown, but I got one left. And I can still, it doesn't matter if they're grown or not, I can still reach out to them over the phone, through texts, through FaceTime, all the rest, right? So just because our kids are grown doesn't mean that we can't reach out to them. If we haven't been the best parent, don't take it too personal, because most of us aren't. I remember Pastor Chuck Smith said he felt sorry for his firstborn kids. He said when his youngest came along, he said he did a great job with her. He said he learned from the rest. And so often, it's kind of funny because we're put into this parenting thing, and we really, most of us didn't get much advice on how to do it. It's like you have kids and you go, now what? And all of a sudden they start being jerks, now what? And if you're like me, a lot of times you discipline them in the wrong way and everything else. But, through this morning, hopefully I can present this and show you what we should do and what we shouldn't do. Amen. So I'm going to try and get through chapter 14 this morning. And we're just going to take a few verses at a time, 3 here, 11 here, 12 here, and kind of chew on it, because it's a pretty interesting story. And the story is like this, just to give you a quick overview. David has failed. He slept with Bathsheba. Everybody knows the story. Everybody knows it. He failed, and he had her husband Uriah killed because he couldn't get rid of the evidence, which was a baby. He got Bathsheba pregnant. Well, through all this, you don't keep secrets like that. People talk. People know. And so his kids are looking at David's life, and I believe they're going, and I don't know how many times I've heard this, that the kids say, well, you did it. Why shouldn't I if you did it? Even when you're younger. Like my kids can't really say that to me because I got saved when, before I had most of them. I got a whole crew. But even when you're kind of like, you could be squeaky clean and they're still going to find ways around. So I'm not going to put all the blame on David, but we can be a good example and try to detour our kids. And one way we're going to see here is through discipline. If we never discipline our kids, guess what's going to happen? Our kids are going to make us pay for it. You're going to pay for it. And then some of you are going, well, don't even have kids. Well, if you're young, you probably will. And if your kids are already grown, then you can still deal with your kids and still work with them, still guide them in the right direction, right? So let's read verses 1 through 3 and take off here. You guys ready? We prayed already, didn't we? Yeah, it's too many things when I was younger that kind of messed my brain up. Praise the Lord. The renewing of my mind is going to take a little longer than the one. So for chapter 14, verse 1, it says, so Joab, the son of Zeruiah. Now, do you guys know who that is? Joab is David's nephew. Zeruiah, you would think it's a guy, but it's a girl. That's David's sister. So it says, Joab, the nephew of David, the son of Zeruiah, the sister of David, perceived that the king's heart was concerned about Absalom. So David's nephew's watching everything. And Absalom he's over in a place called Geshur. Geshur is where his grandpa is the king of Geshur. David took this man's daughter and made her one of his concubines, slept with her, and that's how Absalom come along. So Absalom is back at Geshur with his grandpa. Why? Because he killed Amnon. Now this sounds like something out of a soap opera, right? So Absalom killed Amnon, the oldest brother. Why? Because Amnon had raped Tamar. This is crazy, isn't it? But this has all been done. So Absalom waited 2 years after the rape of his sister. After he raped her, he took her off to Geshur, to his grandpa's place. He's been there now 3 years. So it's been 5 years since Tamar was raped, and he's been there. So Joab at this point says, he's concerned about Absalom. Verse 2, and Joab sent to Tekoa and brought from there a wise woman and said to her, please pretend to be a mourner and put on mourning apparel. Do not anoint yourself with oil, but act like a woman who has been mourning a long time for the dead. Go to the king and speak to him in this manner. So Joab put the words in her mouth. So Joab's on the side, and he's working out this deal because he sees Israel is suffering because David is not dealing with his son Absalom. The world's looking, they're not just like us. We can do this stuff nobody would notice. But David is the king of Israel. And they're noticing what's going on. And so Joab, who is his general in his army, his nephew, but he's also the general of David's army, he's looking at it and he's going, we need to get David's attention. Remember Nathan the prophet? How he got David's attention about sleeping with Bathsheba and killing Uriah. He came and said, I knew a man with a little ewe lamb. And then he said, you're the man, David. Well, they're kind of doing the same thing here. They're come to David and they're making up this story. Now, what's wrong with this story? The problem is, it was none of Joab's business. None of his business. A lot of times we get into family business. I will never get in your business unless you ask me to. Or unless you want to get in ministry. Then you're asking for it. But it was none of Joab's business. So he shouldn't have been getting in the middle of all David's business. It was his children. David should have been dealing with it. But another thing you notice is there was no prayer put into this. As Joab begins to work out this deal, he didn't pray one time about it. He didn't put any prayer into it. And another thing about this whole thing is, listen, Absalom, after 3 years in Geshur with his grandpa, after 2 years after his sister was raped, so it's been 5 years, he still has not repented. And we're going to see that. He still hasn't repented. So we'll go from verse 4, and this is the woman from Tekoa. It says, and when the woman of Tekoa spoke to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and prostrated herself and said, help, O king. She's a good actor, isn't she? Remember, she's just making this whole story up. You know, Joab just told her, go make this whole story up. This lady's a good actor. Then the king said to her, what troubles you? And she answered, indeed, I am a widow. My husband is dead. Now your maidservant has 2 sons, and the 2 fought with each other in the field, and there was no one to part them, but the one struck the other and killed him. And now the whole family has risen up against your maidservant, and they said, deliver him who struck his brother, that we may execute him for the life of his brother whom he killed, and we will destroy the heir also, so they would extinguish my ember that is left, and leave to my husband neither name nor remnant on the earth. Then the king said to the woman, go to your house, and I will give orders concerning you. So she's got David's attention. And the woman of Tekoa said to the king, O my lord, O king, let the iniquity be on me and on my father's house, and the king and his throne be guiltless. This lady's good. She would convince you. There's people like that, isn't there? They're lying through their teeth, but it sounds so convincing. So the king said, whoever says anything to you, bring him to me, and he shall not touch you anymore. Man, she has conned him. Got him right where she wants him. Then she said, please let the king remember the Lord your God, and do not permit the avenger of blood to destroy anymore, lest they destroy my son. And he said, as the Lord lives, not one hair of your son shall fall to the ground. So at this time, they would have cities of refuge. You can find it in Numbers chapter 35. Cities of refuge were a place, they were a place where if you got in a fight with somebody, let's say you hit him and you didn't mean to kill him, but you killed him, you could run to that city because the avenger of blood would be the family. The family would be after you to come and kill you, you know, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But actually the eye for the eye and a tooth for a tooth was to bring the violence down. Because if you took out my eye, I would take out both of yours. So God was actually bringing the violence down. But this city of refuge was a place where they could run. But when you look at the picture, here it says in Numbers that it was an accident. Well, let me tell you something about the murder here of Amnon. When Absalom put this murder together, it wasn't an accident at all. He had planned it for 2 years. If you go back and read 2 Samuel chapter 13, it says, from the time Tamar was raped, his sister, that he began to plan the murder of his brother Amnon. 2 years later, he would work it all out and kill his brother. So it wasn't an accident. This was a premeditated murder, and he brought his brothers and everybody else into it, right? And so this would not apply. And David, though, at this point, he doesn't have a clue of what's going on. He doesn't know. And yet, David, when he's hearing all these things about this widow, and I think maybe the widow, her saying she's a widow, and this is her only child, maybe that struck a chord with David, and he began to feel sorry for her. You got to be careful, huh? Because this whole story is made up. And yet David is falling for her. He's listening to her and he's going, yeah, you know what, not a hair will be touched, okay, we're going to take care of this, blah, blah, blah. And yet he doesn't know a thing about it. He's just taken her word that this whole thing happened the way she is saying it happened. And yet it's a complete lie. And David is falling for it like a chainsaw tree, isn't he? Proverbs chapter 18, verse 13 says, he who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and a shame to him. So right now David is doing something he shouldn't be doing. He should have checked it out before he made his decision. I think that shouts out to us too that we should be careful about believing somebody at face value. That we should take a little time to pray about it before we make a decision on things, on matters. Especially leaders. And once again, you see Joab, he didn't put no prayer into it. Now you see David, he didn't put no prayer into it. David's just making a decision right there on the spot. Believing the whole lie and everything, a decision right there in the spot. There was no witness, there was no prayer, no anything. And yet David starts making a decision. So this woman from Tekoa, that's where Joab was raised. So he probably knew this lady from the time he was a youngster. And so he knew he could draw her into this whole thing. This is also, Tekoa is a place where John the Baptist lived. He was there. So it's a place that they all know of. And because Joab knew the people, he could drag somebody out of this city and get them to be part of his partner in crime, to go to the king and try and trick the king into forgiving Absalom for what Absalom has done, because he sees that it's causing a problem. So in verse 12 through 15, I put this, that this is a lie wrapped in truth. Watch. Therefore the woman said, please let your servant speak another word to my lord, the king. Now whenever a lady says, let me speak a word, don't believe it, because ladies cannot speak one word. In fact, in the book of Revelation, it says there's going to be silence for a half hour. They're going to have to remove the ladies outside somewhere. Can you imagine the ladies at that time? They're going, because, I don't know, we have been in, I'm not going to reel on the ladies too much, but you guys like to talk. I mean, we get done with our men's breakfast, and I wait like 45 minutes. And then I go up to the trailer and I'm going, Tina, are you guys done yet? No, not yet. Not yet. Which is cool, man. But when it says I've got a word and this lady says, let me speak a word, watch. She's not going to speak a word. She's going to speak a bunch of words. Let your maid servant speak another word to my Lord. And there's where David fails. Say on. So the woman said, why then, now she's going to nail him. Why then have you schemed such a thing against my people, the people of God? For the king speaks this thing as one who is guilty, in that the king does not bring his banished one home. Banished means outlaw. How many of you We're outlaws. But look what she says here. This is a great verse. Verse 14. Remember 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 14. This is what she says. For we will surely die and become like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Yet God does not take away life. Isn't that cool? It says God doesn't take away a life. Listen what she says. But he devises means so that his banished ones, plural, all of us, are not expelled from him. Isn't that a great verse? So that his banished ones, that's you. That's me. I'm an outlaw. I am so far removed from the righteousness of God. Only reason I'm righteous is because of Jesus. I mean, how many people blow every week? Don't raise your hands up because the whole place will go. It look like you guys are worshiping. All of us. We fail every week. But what does it say? What does it say right here? But God does not take away life, but he devises means. He makes a way. He makes a way for you. He makes a way for me. I failed this week. How many people failed this week? Look at you guys worshiping. We all fail. We fall short miserably. And you know what? When I fail, when I fall short, you know what I do? I go, but Jesus never failed. See, this here speaks of Jesus Christ. God, it says he devises means he made a way. He made a way how? Because he sent Jesus Christ to die upon a cross. Jesus lived a sinless life. And he came and he hung upon that cross. And remember, as he looked out upon those crucifying him, he said what? Father, condemn them. No. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. But look at the picture here. David has let Amnon go after he raped his sister. It was 2 years later that Absalom, his brother, would end up killing him. So it tells me this. David, after Amnon raped his sister, half-sister Tamar, did absolutely nothing. Nothing. And Absalom's looking at this whole thing, and it's like this. If you don't want to deal with it, I'll deal with it. Type of thing. So Absalom does what? He sets up a feast. They're having the feast of shearing the sheep, and they all come together. And remember, Absalom went to David and he said, hey, you want to come? And he knew David wouldn't go. David never had time for his family. He was busy being a king. Tells me something, guys. Take time for your family. Take time for your kids. And David says, no, I can't make it. Absalom says, well, can my brothers come? And David says, what do you want your brothers there for? I just want them. We're going to have a feast, have a good time. Okay. One of those parents that just give in. Oh, okay, go ahead. No, if you have to do it, go ahead. And what happens? Absalom gets them all together. He says, when I give you the cue, when Amnon, my oldest brother, is good and drunk, kill him. It was a hit. It's like a mafia picture right here. And what does he do? He says, when he gets drunk, he tells him, go ahead, kill him. Take him out. He takes him out. Then Absalom, after he takes him out, remember what he tells his guys before he does it? He tells them, be strong, be of good courage, you guys. Just do what I say. After they do it, he runs to Goshen and hides. After he tells his men to be of good courage and strong. He's there for what? 3 years. And after 3 years, look at. David still hasn't done anything. David hasn't dealt with Amnon raping his sister. David has not dealt with Absalom killing Amnon. He has done absolutely nothing. When we do absolutely nothing, when our kids are being knuckleheads, and we do absolutely nothing, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get this whole thing. It's going to become a mess for you in the long run. See those little kids when they're like this big, right? And they're already turning purple and telling you no. And they're already falling on the floor when you say, you can't have that. That's the time when you can put the fear of God in them. Once they get to be teenagers, the fear of God's gone. They're going to argue with you. They're going to do what they want. I love it when I see kids that are respectful because the parents have disciplined them properly. But when they want to act up, guess what? Drop the doors. Bam! Okay, I'm sorry. I always share that I didn't whip my kids much. But the one time I did, I remember Joseph was just being a little jerk, and I shared this with him. And he was laughing about it. So I said, upstairs, dude. He's about 8 years old. Took him up there and I wailed on him. He had Levi's on him. He laughed again. I dropped his drawers. Wham! One good swat. Bam! You could hear it go through the house. And he started crying. And you know what he did? He snuggled right up next to me and put his head on my shoulder and just started crying. And I put my arms around him. I said, I love you. You know, I told him, as serious as a heart attack, I told him I didn't want to do that. You know, but when you want to act that way, you're going to get it. You know what? He straightened up. He was just a good little kid, man. But if you let your kids go, let me tell you what they're going to do. They're going to let you have it. And right here, this lady from Tekoa, she tells David basically, when in verse 12 through 15, she says, basically, you know what? You'll come to my son's rescue when I tell you this, but you didn't come to your own son's rescue. You know what? You're ready to forgive my son, a story that's been made up, but you're not forgiving Absalom for what he did. A true story. You're not forgiving him. See, there comes a time in your life when your children, you're going to have to learn to forgive them. You're going to have to learn to treat them like anybody else when they become adults. You're going to have to learn to let them have it at times. And it comes down to this. It comes down to forgiveness. David was not forgiving. He was not forgiving Absalom. Now you think about this. David had the power. He had the power to bring Absalom back, to either give him time in prison, to either pardon him, but he did absolutely nothing. When our kids mess up and they're doing things, we have the power. Yeah, but they're teenagers. So? You know what gets kids more than anything, these teenagers? Take away their cell phone. Oh, yeah. That's like a life support to kids these days. Look at them. It's like they're on it like all the time. Just, and what is it? It's the same old stuff. I've done it before. It's the same old story over and over and over. But they sit there. And they, you know what? If your kids are teenagers and they got cell phones and they want to be little jerks, take away their cell phones. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to threaten you. I'll call CPS. Go ahead, they'll take you. Solve my problem right there. See, it's the other side of it is let them go. Let them do what they want to do. The other side is just let them do what they want to do. You know what's going to happen? They're going to end up a monster. Just like your Absalom. We're going to see in chapter 15 that Absalom's going to come back and he's going to make David pay for not dealing with him. Just like our children. I love that commercial. I shared this a couple of weeks ago, that commercial where the kids are complaining about what their parents did. And you made me get home by 10 o'clock, and you wouldn't let me hang around with so-and-so, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end, they all come together and they go, thank you. Because the parents did what was right. Doing what's right with your kids is not easy. Because your kids, even when they're little, they've got such a strong will. When they don't get their way, ready to just drop and roll and fight and bite and yell and everything else. So in verses 16 through 20, the truth comes out. David starts recognizing, watch. It says, for the king will hear and deliver his maidservant from the hand of the man who would destroy me and my son together from the inheritance of God. Your maidservant said, the word of my lord the king will now be comforting. For as the angel of God, so is my lord the king in discerning good and evil. She's kind of like buttering him up, huh? You are such a great guy. You have discernment. You are, good and evil. And may the Lord your God be with you. And the king answered and said to the woman, please do not hide anything from me that I ask you. And the woman said, please let my lord the king speak. Now David's starting to recognize there's something going on. Starting to recognize it. He goes, so the king said, is the hand of Joab with you in all this? Starting to recognize, wait a minute, what's going on here? I remember Nathan the prophet when those guys tricked me. Now I'm remembering this. You know, it's like, hey, wait a minute, what are you guys doing? And the woman answered and said, can you imagine being this woman? Joab talked to her into doing this, told her what to say and everything. Now she's done it. And now the king's figuring it out, and she's in front of him. You know, this king has the power to whack her right there. He has the power to take her head off right there. That was the king's power to be able to do that to a person if they did something like this. And so she begins to go, as you live, my lord the king, no one can turn to the right hand or to the left from anything that my lord the king has spoken. For your servant Joab commanded me, and he put all these words in my mouth of your maidservant. Kind of reminds me of Adam and Eve. She starts blaming Joab. Remember, Adam, it's the woman you gave me. And then like us, we passed the buck and we got caught. Even when we're kids, how about when you got caught when you're doing something? It was always somebody else's fault, wasn't it? I know for me, I was always blaming somebody. And right here she's going, it's Joab. He's the one that told me to do this. And she probably figures it's, you know, that's his nephew, so she wouldn't get whacked. So verse 20, to bring about his charge of affairs, your servant Joab has done this thing. So it's Joab's fault. But my Lord is wise according to the wisdom of the angel of God to know everything that is in the earth. That's not true. He doesn't know everything that is in the earth. But she is puffing him up right now because she doesn't want to get killed. You're such a great king. You know everything. She's trying to save herself right now. Why would Joab do this? Why has Joab put this woman up to it? Joab is actually having a moment of goodness. He's looking out for Israel because Israel's paying for David not dealing with his family. Just like your family will pay when you don't deal with them. Parents, when you don't deal with your children, your family will pay for it. Fathers, if you don't want to train up your children, your family will pay for it. If you don't want to be a disciplinarian, your family will pay for it. And it doesn't mean that when you're a disciplinarian and you do all those things that your family's going to be perfect. I remember Billy Graham, I'm sure he raised his kids just right, but at one point his son was, you know, I seen a picture of Franklin right next to Billy at a crusade, and he's got a Beatle shirt on and a Beatle haircut and everything. I'm going, hey, that's Franklin's son, you know. But then he ended up coming back. But at the same time, we need to do our best as parents to raise our children right. And so Joab was concerned, being David's nephew, about this family. And so David's going to end up bringing Absalom back to Jerusalem. He's going to tell him to come back. And there's problems here too. So let's read it, verse 21 through 24. And the king said to Joab, all right, I have granted this thing. So David says, okay, let's do this. Go therefore, bring back the young man Absalom. Then Joab fell to the ground on his face, bowed himself, and thanked the king. And Joab said, today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, my lord, O king, and that the king has fulfilled the request of his servant. So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. And the king said, now listen to this, let him return to his own house, but do not let him see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house, but did not see the king's face. What's wrong with this picture? David's giving in just because somebody has pressured him. It's the only reason. David hasn't dealt with his son. It's just that he knows Israel's getting stressed out over it, so he deals with it. Why? Because he doesn't want to deal with it. He says, yeah, let him come back. Let him come back. Remember, there's been 7 years past. From the time Amnon, the oldest son, raped Tamar, his half-sister. 2 years later, Absalom would have him killed at a feast. He ran to Geshur. It was 3 years that he ended up being in Geshur. Then he comes back and he's in Jerusalem The Bible teaches in 1428 that he's back in Jerusalem now 2 years. So now it's been 7 years. 7 years. And David has not dealt with his children's issues. That's a long time, man. When you compare that to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, it says, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath. Look at chapter 13 and verse 21. When David found out that his daughter had been raped by his son. Look what it says in chapter 13, 2 Samuel 21. It says, but when King David heard all these things, he was very angry. He was torqued. But he did nothing. You know you can be angry and not sin, right? When we sin is when we punch somebody in the face, right? I'm mad. Punch. We should get mad when our children do things that are ungodly. We should get upset about that. But when we get upset and all we do is cuss and rave and yell, that doesn't look good. And all we do is say, if you do that again, I'm going to rah, rah, rah. And so after so many times of that, they go, yeah, right. The Bible says, be angry, but it says, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath. So there's two don'ts. Don't sin, and don't let it go. First of all, how you deal with it is so important, isn't it? That you don't sin in dealing with your children. That you don't sin when your child begins to sin and fail. So you don't sin how? By dealing with it calmly, and you tell them, I ain't got to get upset about it. I'm the boss. You're going to do this, this, and this, or I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then you follow through with your promises to your child. Right? Okay. And the second thing is you don't let it go. How often do parents sweep it under the carpet and they just go, well, you know, that's the way they are, and I'm just, you know, they'll grow through it. They'll get through it eventually. No, they won't. Not if you're not doing nothing about it. You need to deal with it. You need to deal with it in love. I guarantee if I wouldn't have grabbed my son, dropped his drawers, and wailed on him, I think he would have gotten worse and worse and worse. And I think it's the same with all of us, that we need to take the time to do that with our kids. But Absalom is coming back. He hasn't repented. David is just doing it because he's pressured to have Absalom come back. So Absalom is back now in Jerusalem, and we're going to see that he hasn't repented. This is a crazy young man. Watch. Start in verse 25. We'll get to the crazy part in a minute. But he says, now in Israel there was no one who was praised as much as Absalom for his good looks. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. And when he cut his hair of his head, at the end of every year, he cut it because it was heavy on him. When he cut it, he weighed the hair and his head at 200 shekels, according to the king's standard. It says, so to Absalom was born 3 sons, 1 daughter. His name was Tamar. He named his daughter after his sister that was raped. She was a woman of beautiful appearance. So you get a picture of this family. This is a wealthy family. This is a family with power, a family with money. You know, I thought that when it says that he cut his hair, the amount, it says there, I thought it was 1.5 pounds, but you know how much his hair weighed at the end of each year? 5.5 pounds. He would have been a perfect front man for a heavy metal band, huh? You figure all that hair straight out like this? But it says he was, you know, just a handsome guy. He looked beautiful. But do you realize Absalom, all his decisions right now, mentions his family. Why does it mention his family? Because his decisions are now going to affect his family. David's decisions have affected his family, all of his kids. Amnon's dead. Absalom is running his own program, being a little jerk. And Absalom, as we're going to see, he's going to end up dead too. His uncle is going to take him out. And so Absalom, his good looks, his power. You know what I thought about? I thought about, JFK, John F. Kennedy Jr. I remember seeing that young man, and he was a handsome young man. Had everything going for him. And because he could do whatever he wanted, he had power. He was a son of a president. He was a Kennedy. He jumped in his plane one night, and people advised him not to do it because the plane was high-tech, and he wasn't. But he knew how to fly a plane. He flew that plane, he took off when the sun was going down, and at that time he had to rely on the panel there, all the gauges and all. He didn't know how to do it. The plane went down and killed him, his wife, and a friend they had with him. Why? Because he could do whatever he wanted to do. Let me tell you something. We need to teach our kids you can't do whatever you want to do. Absalom's family, we're going to close with this, okay? I put like father, like son. Watch what Absalom does. He's such a spoiled little brat. Watch. And Absalom dwelt, remember, he's been 2 years now back in Jerusalem. And during this time, his dad has done nothing. You know that this young man is probably getting upset with his dad. Why don't you call me? Why don't you tell me something? Why don't you rebuke me? At least tell me something. His dad has done nothing. Nothing. And so look, he starts calling for Joab. Now, you brought me here, Joab, Uncle Joe. You brought me here. What's going on? And look, verse 28. And Absalom dwelt two full years in Jerusalem, but did not see the king's face. Therefore Absalom sent for Joab to send him to the king, but he would not come to him. And when he sent again the second time, and he would not know much, but it's kind of humorous. Absalom does. So he sent his servants, and he says, see, Joab's field is near mine, and he has a barley there. Go and set it on fire. And Absalom's servants set the field on fire. He said, if you're not going to come to me, I am going to get your attention. I like what Charles Spurgeon said about this. He said, sometimes God gets our attention by setting our barley field on fire. He, knowing that we will not come by any other means, sends our serious trial. He sets our barley field on fire, which he has the right to do, seeing our barley field is far more his than ours. What a great example, huh? That God will get our attention, just like Absalom was getting the attention of Joab. And look what happens. Then Joab, verse 31, he gets his field burnt up, and Joab says, arose and he came to Absalom's house, and he said to him, why have your servants set my field on fire? Now you realize Joab's a bad dude. This is a tough guy. He takes people out left and right. He's got his nephew, or his uncle David. He's David's general of the army. He's a bad dude. He knows, but yet he wouldn't mess with Absalom because that's the king's son. Absalom is a spoiled brat. And Absalom answered Joab, look, he said, I sent to you saying, come here so that I may send you to the king to say, why have I come to Geshur? It would be better for me to be there still. He said, I'd rather be at my grandpa's place. He said, now therefore, let me see the king's face. But if there's iniquity in me, let him execute me. Solomon said, doesn't recognize there's any sin in his life. He has murdered his brother, brought his brothers in, and yet he tells Joab, if there's any iniquity in me, let the king kill me then. He doesn't recognize his sin whatsoever. And that's why it's a bad thing for David to do what he's about to do. Watch. Verse 33. So Joab went to the king and told him, and when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king. And listen, it says, then the king kissed Absalom. He kissed the young man that had murdered his oldest son and sent him on his way. Nothing. No discipline, no nothing. Sends him on his way. I'm going to read a couple of commentaries and we'll close. One man said about this, his name's Trapp, he said, he should have kicked him rather and not have hardened him to further villainy. In other words, He should have done something to him about this. Instead, he kisses him. A guy named Redpath, he said, David, for forgiveness of Absalom was completely inadequate, leading to further outbreak of sin. God's forgiveness of man's soul is completely adequate and a great deterrent to continue sin. See, the thing with God forgiving us, he chastises us, doesn't he? Whom the Lord loves, in Hebrews it says, whom the Lord loves, he chastises, and he scourges every son or every daughter that he receives. We don't get away with that. If I do that, God's not going to kiss me on the cheek and go, good job, son, as I'm living in sin. Let me tell you, if you're a child of God, he's going to convict you. He's going to whoop your butt. If you can live in sin, listen, if you can live in sin and have no conviction, you're in a really, really dangerous place. If you can get away, I know personally, when I start getting out of line, God whips my butt, just like I whipped Job's butt. And he lets me know he is not happy whatsoever. I guess, to come to a conclusion, I guess, the Bible in Hebrew, or 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 13, it says, these things were written for our admonition. In other words, for our instruction in righteousness. As I read and see what happens with David because he didn't discipline his kids properly, we should take that to heart. And we should say, you know what, I need, even though it's not pleasurable, even though they're going to fight with me, I need to discipline my children properly. Amen? Don't make it a family tradition to let your children do whatever they want. 2 and 4? I'm going to call Pastor Tom up. He's going to lead us in communion.